Good day, everyone. Welcome to another dynamic discussion as we go deeper into these topics that are not often talked about, and often these are the most important things to talk about. So I'm excited to get into this topic today, which is one that's often, rarely talked about. And it's kind of a taboo thing to even get into, yet we are so profoundly drawn to it. It's so deeply embedded into us, this inclination towards connection. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about sex. So what is sex? How has it been taught to us by this cabal-created society, this inverted reality? And what is the true purpose of this connection? Is it wrong that we pursue this, or is this something that we have just been twisted about? And so, I'm really excited to get into this discussion today. It's something that we can all relate with, and I'm quite certain that it's not something that we've talked about nearly enough. So, I'm really just delighted to be joined here by my sister Noa for this discussion today. So welcome to the show, Noa. I'm really grateful to have you here to share your wisdom on the subject, and let's jump right in. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Telegram is a little slow with me for some reason. Yes, hello everyone. Hi, Justin. Wonderful to be here on this moon day. And to no surprise, the cosmos are aligning perfectly for this conversation. Really, there's no coincidences that we are meeting here today and discussing this very serious topic. When the sun just moved to Gemini earlier this morning. So we are officially, at least according to the tropical zodiac, officially out of Taurus season, and we have entered the Mercury-ruled sign Gemini, that is the messenger of the gods, and conveying, exchanging information, and sharing the message. So that's one thing. And then Mars, that is still in Aries, which is very much related to our primal human nature, the root chakra. Mars is very strong in Aries, and it's also our desires and our passions and what we are driven by. And Mars, so Mars is in Aries, but it's conjoining the North Node officially tomorrow, I believe. So that's just, the North Node is what we are being invited to focus on in the cycle of the nodes, which is about a year and a half. And then we have Venus, so the divine masculine of the zodiac and the divine feminine. She's finishing her journey in Taurus, and Taurus is about the body and sensuality and our five senses. So I would say Mars in Aries is more our sexuality, and Venus in Taurus is our sensuality. And she is, she'll be exiting Taurus and entering Gemini as well later on this week. And she will be meeting Mr. Jupiter on Wednesday at the last degree of Taurus, which is very significant that they're meeting there. And that won't happen again in Taurus for another 12 years. And potentially even longer. Yeah, I need to do the math. Probably longer than that. And then, if that wasn't enough, the moon is moving into Scorpio later tonight, which is very significant to all of you Sun in Scorpio individuals. And we can weave that into our conversation today. But the moon is moving into Scorpio tonight. So it's in the last degrees of Libra, which is also, Libra is very much about connections and relationships and such. So here we are talking about this, what you said, Justin, taboo, which is so silly. Like, why is it taboo? It's a part of this human experience, you know, it's like, yeah, it just comes to show just how distorted this topic is. And, or not even topic, this aspect of our human experience. And distortion comes from either suppression, which we see that right in sexuality. We have like the religious teachings, and even in New Age spirituality, the notion that, well, sex is bad, and if you are holy, then you don't engage in that act. And it has given it such a bad rap, such a negative connotation. And then that's one aspect, the suppression. And then we have the flip side, or the other side of that extreme, which is the abuse of a particular power, a particular source of energy. You know, so just like with food, right? We've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, that it's really not about the food so much. It's about our relationship to it and how we interact with it. And then our body as well. What is our relationship to it and the divine design of this body? So the digestive system, yeah, has one function to digest food, but what if there's another function, right? And we can say the same thing about sex and sexual exchange, that, well, yeah, as humans, at least one thing that we've been taught is we need to engage sexually in the way that we know it in order to procreate. And it's either for that or for satisfying some kind of a need for pleasure, right? Just like food has been distorted, and now it's like entertainment and pleasure, and sex is in the same category, basically. So yeah, we're looking at those extremes, and then within that, we come back to, well, what is the truth in all of this? This is such a mess. And it's very much related to our conversation from last week about sovereignty. This is actually, that was the inspiration for this topic. It's still under the umbrella of sovereignty. And I mentioned last week about, well, who's really occupying this field? The field that I call Noah. What and who is occupying this field, and what am I allowing in to this field? And anything that enters this field from the subtle level all the way to the less subtle is going to leave a mark in this field in some way, shape, or form. So when we talking about sexual exchange, and, well, let me just reverse this for a moment. Any exchange with another individual on a physical level is going to leave something in this field for both, or if it's multiple, but both people involved. So when we go to the physical level, any kind of fluid exchange, you know, it starts from like a touch to saliva, and then we go into like fluid exchange on a sexual level. That is very significant. Like, just, there's so much codes in those fluids. So many codes in those fluids. Even our saliva. So I really like to dive deep into it and bring the awareness to what is it that we exchange with another individual. It's not just, oh, we just kissed, or we just had sex. You know, it's not like a casual thing. It's not a casual thing. What we put in our body, what we put in our consciousness, what we put in our field is going to leave a mark. So the question is, what mark am I allowing in? And just to have the awareness that I am opening my space to someone and something. And if this space is my temple, which it is, then, we were talking about the guard, right? At the entrance. That's a discernment. And sexual exchange was never designed to just be just a casual thing. Oh yeah, let's just do it for the sake of doing it. Even when it comes to procreation, because even that was never meant to be like, oh, oops, we got pregnant. Oh, well, shoots. Kind of like an accidental thing, or even if it's not accidental, even if there is the intention to bring a child into this world, it was never meant to be just whenever or whatever. Actually, even according to astrology and timing, that we can really dive deep into that as well, that the timing for birth, the most ideal timing really, is March equinox. So you would get pregnant in June, solstice, and then springtime is where the offsprings will come. And yeah, anyhow, that's a whole nother topic. I'm going on a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but yeah. So just like with everything else, right, that we're been talking about here is, well, we are the ones to dig into the archives of truth and find out, well, what is my power as human? Erase everything I've been told, and, well, maybe not everything, but the majority. And go on an exploration. And it's a big one, like the sex piece and the health is so huge. So yeah, I want to hear what you have to say right now, and then I'll go into a little bit more of the health stuff. And
yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you for that introduction there. And it is such an important topic to go into. And really, we can sort of simplify this just with everything. There is in this experience, we have the choice between pursuing a path that is the downward causation, temporary electrical discharge, which is a short and fast path that leads to death. And this is what all temptations of the flesh, this pursuit of sort of lower self-desire, this is what all of them lead to. They all are a path that leads to death. And there's nothing bad or wrong about that. However, the creation is set up in a way to sort of urge us to come back to the path where we are living, the path to life. God is the God of the living. So the other path is the path of alignment, of connection, of harmony, of union, of the perpetual magnetic motion, the lift. One is falling and one is lifting. So one leads to death and one leads to life. And the sort of name of this game is to figure out which of these choices lead me to a path of living and connection and harmony, so that I can avoid the temporary experience of living and dying continuously. I want to live. And that's why all of these ascended masters, including Yeshua, taught this life path. And so it's up to us to sort of reconfigure this society, which has largely been run by the death cult, by those who want to push and influence everyone into this death path, and to make these choices that align in that way, to bring us into their death cult. So we have to really start with that aspect of recognizing that everything that we've been taught by organized society was designed to be a lie, to deter us away from the life path. So sex is included in that. So all the ways that we've been programmed and conditioned into viewing sex has been inverted, distorted, that it's just this pursuit of physical pleasure for a temporary experience. Even the way that we view procreation, and that's a topic I'd love to get into, but just this idea that it has to be this way, where the man ejaculates and that's what transmits this DNA to the woman, and that's what causes the pregnancy. But what if there's another way? What if there's another way to transmit this energy from body to body without the need of spilling the physical seed, without the need of losing life force, our essence within us, and still bring about conception in that way? What if that is the Immaculate Conception? What if that is what we are supposed to do with that? So we'll get into that topic. But it is really just it's a powerful reexamination of what we're doing and how to reclaim, like you said, our sovereignty, so that we're not, because the way that we've been conditioned with sex now, it's not about connection, it's about gratification. So essentially we're using another person's body or another person's whatever to satisfy ourselves. So everything within it, no matter how much we try and sugarcoat that, is selfish desire. I want to get off. I want to pursue my physical pleasure. Whereas sex, I mean, even just examining the name of it, S would be the sine wave, the Kundalini, E, the energy. So the Kundalini energy within, and then X is the connection point. X marks the spot, the union between the masculine and the feminine. So this act is the marriage between these two forces. It is within creation. We have this dualistic experience of pretending to separate just to have the exaltation and joy of coming back together again. So to find our self, our sense of self through the separation, and then rediscover how to reconnect with ourselves again. So this act is merely a physical representation of how do we rejoin in that way? How can I reclaim that singular instance of connection within the duality, within the challenge of the duality? So if sex becomes about connection, then that's the higher form of it. But we have to get really clear about how this shows up, especially given the pornographic and distorted ways that it has been pushed onto us. And how do we reclaim that? Just from personal experience, it has been a pervasive element in my life, just as I know for most men and people in general. The distorted version of this pornography has been so pervasive, to be thrust into a reality where that is shown. So we have this, as I mentioned, this taboo subject that people don't talk about. So nobody talks about this. On one hand, you've got no connection, no real sense of whatever this is. Yet within our bodies, within my sense of self, I have this draw to this. So I'm not allowed to really talk about it, but I'm so drawn to it in the same way. And the only avenue to pursue it, seemingly, is this inverted pornographic reality. So it just gives this really unhealthy ping pong back and forth between these extremes of the shame and the guilt for even having this be a part of myself, versus the sort of unhealthy pursuit of this physical pleasure through the pornography, through the pursuit of momentary sexual exchanges and things of that nature. So there's no healthy balance. And of course, the middle path is always the way. That's always the balance point. So how can we stop ping-ponging between these two and come back to that balance point, come back to that union, come back to that connection? X marks the spot. So yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful topic to get into. Really grateful to be here. And yeah, that's what I got to share so far. You're muted.
Can you hear me now? Where do I go from here, Justin? Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing all of that in such a beautiful way. It's definitely a big part of my mission. Like, the Scorpio cluster that I have in my chart, it's there's no doubt, and I've always known this, and it's just being revealed more and more of how much, I'm on this mission, and to bring in this conversation into the health community, because there's, like you said, not many people talk about this as it relates to health, aside from, which I'm going to touch on, aside from just the sexual piece, how distorted it has been, how it's been used as a weapon like food, how it's been used as a mean to perpetuate feelings of guilt and shame, consciously and unconsciously. So there's that. And then there's the whole other world of, actually, if you are on a health journey, if you're aspire to not just be healthy, but regenerate your body, we got to talk about sex. You got to talk about sex. And, when I work with men, actually, one of the questions I have on health questionnaire is, do you ejaculate? And how often? And, it's kind of like, why is she asking me this? But it's like, well, do you want to be healthy? Because if you're going to tell me that you're ejaculating 4 times a week, then that needs to stop, because it's killing you. Right? So I just so appreciate that you brought it up. The whole pornography thing, and how that has been used as a way to weaken men. So Chiron, the wounded healer in astrology, is in Aries. And the journey Chiron in Aries for 7 years. So we are like in the midst of it right now. It's in the 3rd decan, but it takes its time. So everything we're talking about here today is so Chiron in Aries. Healing our sexuality, healing the weak masculine, the masculine that has been wounded, that has been used, really. So, as I said, sex or our sexual energy has been used as a weapon, just like food. Really, you take those two, it's very easy to put the two together and see what's going on. That if you feed humans, overfeed them, they'll get weak and die. And same thing with sex. And with sex, food will influence men, women pretty much similarly. If you overeat or eat junk, we're not going to see a distinction between men and women. You're going to be sick at some point in some way, shape, or form. With sex, though, there is a bit of a distinction. So pornography is the number one industry, the most prosperous industry in the world. Number one. That is shocking, and it's capturing even teenagers and young boys. I would say, I can imagine that some women are drawn to pornography as well. I don't know. That's not my experience. I was fascinated by sex, though. I remember as a kid. But now I know what it was. I was fascinated by this beautiful thing of two humans coming together. So that's a seed that has always been in my heart. Like, just knowing that part of this human experience, at least for me, is the divine union in that form. But in general, I would say that pornography captures men as the majority. Correct me if I'm wrong there. And there's a purpose behind it. because the more men spill their seed, the weaker they get on all levels, physically, mentally, and spiritually. So it's basically depleting a man's life force. And just like you said, Justin, and we've talked about this society has conditioned us to die. And then we make choices that support that program. I'll ejaculate myself to death, or I'll eat myself to death, or I'll drink myself to death, or I'll go into relationship to death, whatever it may be, that it's just keep perpetuating that death cycle that you talked about. But that doesn't make the thing itself evil. That, sex is evil, right? No, it's not the sex. It's your relationship to it and how you go about it, just like with food. So that's the masculine side of things, or I wouldn't say masculine, but gender, when it comes to gender, for men, that's the issue. And just like with food, we have a spectrum, right? So pornography, I would say that's more of like the extreme on the scale of how distorted sexuality can be. And then we've got the gray areas between like complete abstinence, I'm a monk, I don't even want to look at women, and then pornography, that will be the other extreme. And then there's all the gray areas in between, that maybe you're not into pornography, or that's something you used to be into and now you're not, but there's still, like, we can see the distortions and whatever reminiscences of that are still hanging. So it's just like the food that I've been talking about, that when I like to take myself as an example, right? I was on the extreme of the eating disorders. And then along my way, I started healing, but there was kind of like the remnant of that. And until we place of complete peace and healing, and that is no longer an issue whatsoever, because we have transformed on such a high level that our relationship to that thing has completely transformed. And just like I've been talking about the food, that there are levels, right? Like we keep progressing on the path, that most likely, a sex addict is not going to go from being addicted to sex straight into pure and, I'm now practicing sacred sexuality. There's going to be some sort of a process there, right? So just like somebody that has eating disorders or eating a lot of junk or whatever, there's going to be a process to detach from those habits and tentacles and even physical processes that need the time to change and transform. So that's the men part with the pornography, and wherever a guy can find himself on that scale of learning how to retain and master that sexual energy without suppressing it, because that's what I've seen so much in a lot of the spiritual communities, and men that do aspire to transform and to change. And that's part of the journey, right? Like you say always, Justin, is like finding the balance, and to find the balance is kind of like swinging from one side to the next. So going from pornography or using women for gratification to like complete abstinence. I don't want to hear about sex, and completely denying it, just to find that middle point. Now, for women, the sexual energy with men has been used as a weapon to weaken the life force of men. So we have weak men in our society, or distorted minds that are not connected to the source because they keep spilling the source. And for women, and this is a big thing for me, is that we have been given a tremendous responsibility when it comes to sexual energy. And it is like a a treasure chest, our bodies as females, like absolutely treasure chests, that it's part of the journey to find that and to explore that. And again, realize what this feminine biological design is all about. And so on the dark side with women, well, there's a couple of things with women, but there's the using of the sexual energy to get what a woman wants in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes it can be very unconscious. But using sensuality, like that's the dark side of Venus. Using sensuality, using sexuality as a manipulative mean. And, you know, with every power comes great responsibility. So we have that aspect. And then on the receiver part of what we talking about, the sexual exchange, that women, more than men, like every time you come together, and obviously here I'm talking about men and women. It can definitely be two women and two men. And that may change some things. It's a bit of a different equation that I cannot speak from personal experience, right? So I am going to keep it on men and women just because that is my personal experience. So when it comes to that interaction of male and female in physical form, we are the receivers. We literally take in, bring in on such a deep level whatever it is that is coming to us. And so that also has a depleting effect to some degree. It's different than men, but when we keep receiving different energies from different sources, the body stores it. And just again, when we look at the female anatomy of the vagina and the cervix, and what enters that cave can stay there for a long time. Now, so when we're talking about sovereignty, an energetic blueprint of a partner can stay in a woman's field for a long time and has different implications on that field of that female individual, physically, mentally, energetically, and especially if there is an ejaculation, that actually there was internal ejaculation, maybe with no pregnancy, but there was that. And if that's the case, then it's even more, or it leaves a deeper mark on that woman's field. So when, you know, relating that to the whole purification journey and what we've been talking about just for the last few weeks, you know, this has to come to the light. It has to come to the light that to purify the system, it also requires, well, dig into your sexual archives. How many partners, the interactions, what was the quality of the exchange, the level of the exchange, and consciously and intentionally ask to be purified of those imprints, right? So women are being depleted in that way and are being weakened without knowing. And the female body and the female principle, the feminine principle of life, it was designed to be the leading force. Like you always say, Justin, right? You let her lead. And even on a physical level, as humans, there's really something to be said about the power that we do have as female incarnations and the biological structure of our body as females that are not the same as men. We're not the same. Yes, we are all one, and on a soul level, we're not female nor male, but we are playing a human game. So we can be like, oh, I'm just going to ignore it, whatever. No, there's a reason why a soul incarnated into a female body and why a soul incarnated into a male body. So as women, if you are in a female incarnation, super essential to recognize the power that we've been given and how do we handle that? What do we do with that? So sex has been used as a weapon to weaken men, to deplete men, and to steal in some way, or even we can say weaken even the female body and the feminine power that it holds. And so in order to correct that, to come back to be back on the divine course, then we must bring awareness to those things and look a little bit deeper of what is here for us to discover and explore.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Yeah, when you were speaking about this inversion for the two genders, it really starts like it's so clear when you see the purpose behind it. Like truly, this is all about the distortion of the family, which is the Trinity, which is the creative process. This is how everything shows up within this experience. So the inversion of man, who the man is supposed to play the role of the protector, supposed to create that safe barrier and that safe space to exist in. So he kind of represents the outer wall of a containment. So that's the wall that has to be breached first by someone who's attempting to distort or get to the treasure, which would be the child. That's the precious innocence at the center. So his barrier protects that. So how do you distort this protective wall? Well, you create the inverted man is either weak and cowardly on one end. So how do you weaken a man to that point? Or how do you convince them to become attackers, rapists? How do you convince them to become the ones actually breaching that wall? So either which way. And of course, when we're in that weakened state, we kind of ping pong between those two states of being, to where in some senses we become that domineering, attacking, aggressive, violent force. And on others, we're so weakened and powerless, feeling such that we're unable to perform our duty as the protector. So that's the first wall that gets breached in this assault upon our purity within. And then the second wall is her. She's the one who protects the inner boundary. She's the guardian of the family. She's the guardian of the child. So how do you invert that in essence? Well, you use her, one, to tempt and break down the outer wall from within, to convert oneself to become the Babylon whore, to where she uses and abuses that sexual energy to tempt and distort and weaken that outer wall. And she also can fall into the victim powerless mode, where she feels unsafe and is unable to care and bring in that sacred cultivation that she's designed to. And so when you have both of these boundaries breached, there's no safety for the child, which is the creative essence. That's what those unions between these two seemingly opposite forces is designed to care for and to grow, is that purity within. So it is all about the children, and that child exists within all of us. And that's been the affront. That's been the assault to breach both of these boundaries, to convert men into weak, powerless cowards, or to domineering, violent rapists. And I'm not saying that necessarily physically, though that certainly happens, but just energetically, this taking essence. So to convert to one or the other in that, and to convert women into the same of a similar, but a Babylon whore, to continue to invert the masculine, or to be a cowardly victim as well. And either which way is taking us away from the sovereign, stable, strengthened space of both of these, which the men as this divine protector, warrior if need be, but a calm, gentle man in that sense, to find that balance and that peace within that strength. That's his divine role. And her divine role is to be that virgin mother, not virgin as assuming that no sexual encounter has ever happened, but a virgin implying purity of the self, purity of the intention, purity of the body and how it shows up. So when she's in that state and when he's in that state, then they're able to provide the safest and most beautiful expression for the child to emerge. And of course, this can happen physically, but I'm talking more about the energetic creative process. So it happens between man and woman, but it also happens within us. When we let our guard down, when our inner masculine is not doing its duty to protect the outer walls, when our inner feminine is not doing its duty and is utilizing these temptations to invert and distort that outer protective barrier, then all the safety is breached and we're vulnerable to attack. And so any parasitic energy that comes along has a perfectly ripened child to continue harvesting and stealing from. So it is up to us to reclaim that, re-establish these walls, these barriers, and guard the sovereign kingdom and queendom. Otherwise, it will continue down that path, which always leads to death. So the life path is about strengthening this perfect symbiosis between these forces to create that experience in that way. So yeah, it's beautiful how it shows up. And when we can honestly look at how these pieces have become unraveled, we can start to put them back together again. Having conversations like this to identify areas where I might have, my walls have been breached, or I have been practicing in a way that doesn't sustain that. And then, talking more specifically about the sexual act itself. How do I embody that role? You said it beautifully, that women are here for that higher purpose, to guide in that sense, to really show and bring man into realization of, okay, this is how we can do this. This is how we can practice this in a way to where I feel safe, and ultimately the child is safe. She's got to be that guide and that barometer to really gauge where that safety lies. But he has just as important of a duty to suspend his internal urges of pursuing this conquest, this domineering aspect. He has to withhold this animalistic primal sense within himself, which is very challenging within man, especially given the conditions that we've been thrust into. So we each have different vitally important roles to play in this. And if we're each showing up in that sense, then we can create the most beautiful expression known to creation, because this truly is the sacred sex. This is the union between these two opposite forces. This is the union between the perpetual motion of the feminine and the perfect stillness, stationary of the father, of the masculine. The friction between these two is what causes all of creation to form. So this is just an opportunity for us to express on a physical level and celebrate, give homage to the fact that this creation is so divine. It's so perfect. It's so beautiful. And this is a way that we can celebrate that. So yeah, I'll just leave that there.
Beautifully said. Am I muted?
No, you're good. Now you're muted.
It's just, yeah, I'm seeing something completely different on my screen, so it's confusing. Beautifully said. Really beautifully said, Justin. Everything so on point. And this topic is so dear to my heart because that's just like with the food trip and purifying our bodies and becoming free of all the conditionings and the addictions and the attachments and our distorted understanding and relationship to food and this physical body. For me, I see what you just said, what you just shared on the exact same plane. The work of transforming, transmuting this aspect of our being. And men and women in that department have a different function, just like you beautifully explain that. So again, with the food is similar in some ways, but when it comes to our sexual energy, we have subdivisions in a sense, to do the individual work as men and to do the individual work as women. And then if it's truly a calling in your hearts to come together, then by all means. And that's how we start create new societies, right? It starts from the single cell of each and every one of us doing that inner alchemy, right? So I want to touch on that for a moment because it's not either or. And granted, everyone is on a different trip here, right? Everybody has signed up for a different circus show. For some people, it is the path of the monk or the nun, and not even in the sense of like you need to be a monk or you need to be a nun, but you're not really interested in, like, genuinely, you're not interested in an external divine union. Like, it's just not something that is on your plate in this lifetime, right? So some people may not be drawn to that at all. But for those that are, and I know that I am in that category, and many are, and for many of us, it's actually, this incarnation is for that. It is for that. And if that's your thing, then you know it. It's just in your heart. It's been in my heart since I can remember myself. I didn't know what it was. But just like I knew the whole thing about food, like I don't eat food, and I went down the anorexia path, but I had that knowing. And same thing with divine union. I always knew that now that I look back. So there's something to be said about, okay, we have, and this is for all of us, or at least the souls that are here to evolve to such a degree, to master in such a way, the inner alchemy is the first thing in order. That was my awakening, and just to share a little bit about my personal journey. When I got the message, Noah, enough, and I was never like crazy, just like having sex Monday and Thursday every week and different partners. That was never my thing. But it was around when I was completing my Saturn return at the age of 30 that I was with a partner then, and I just kept seeing the same patterns, and there was a lot of sexual intensity with that individual, a lot. And he used that as well to kind of keep me entangled. And so something kind of opened my eyes and saw all that, the distortion there, by the grace of God. And not only that, I said, okay, we no more connecting here like this in this way. But I got the message like, Noah, you take a break. Call it celibacy. I don't like to use that word, but that was it. Basically, it's like, you don't engage. And not just sex. It was just like, no kiss, no nothing. Because it was kind of like, going from one relationship to the next. And for several years with each person, nevertheless, though, I was like, okay, cool. I really got the message. And I would say that started a lot of reevaluating and investigating what we are talking about now, right? And so it's been a 12 years journey, a Jupiter cycle, to expand and grow in that department for me and progress on that path, and realizing that, number one, and that's why many of us, or many people that are on this spiritual path, are called to call it celibacy. Nothing forced, just like with fasting, don't force it. You'll just get the message. I'm ready to take that next step. So same thing with sexuality. You'll just get the message. If it's celibacy or, just whatever it is for the individual. But that's the reason why there is that calling, because that inner alchemy needs to happen first. And in order for that to happen in a pure space, then the field has to be cleared of any imprints, just like I mentioned a little bit ago. And so it may require a few years. It really depends on the individual, how many partners you've had. And I'm talking about both men and women, but especially women. I'll address this for a moment. Depends on how many partners, again, like how many partners have actually ejaculated in your body. Has there been a pregnancy with that individual, regardless if you kept it or not, but the seed was planted. So there's a lot of karma to undo there with that particular individual, with those codes, with the imprints that were left in the body. And that is a process of several years, just like with the purification process. It's like layers upon layers upon layers. And in the energy body, it's going to be removed layer by layer, depending on all those factors. So that inner alchemy cannot really happen in a pure space if you keep engaging, even if it's not intercourse, even if it's whatever, any kind of exchange that there's fluids involved, and this is on a physical level, but it affects, our physical body affects our mind and our energy body. So yes, there is that inner alchemy that has nothing to do with an external partner and an external being. It really is about the inner masculine, the inner feminine, like you beautifully shared, Justin, and cleaning and healing all those wounds and patterns that we've been operating from within ourselves. And then, the relationships are just a reflection. That's all it is. So that's why we need to take a break from all of that, because it's just, I keep projecting the same wounds and same distortions of feminine, masculine onto the partner, regardless of gender. So to take a break from all of that and to keep it in the context of sexuality and sexual exchange, it's an absolute must. If you are on a healing journey, if you are on a regeneration journey, and that inner alchemy is actually a very crucial piece when it comes to the regeneration of the body. Right? So this is where we go into that sacred secretion. The Immaculate Conception, we can say there's several ways to look at it. One of them is that once a month of that Immaculate Conception, that sacred secretion that occurs. That fountain of life, that nectar of life that resides within the body, that has the potential to rise up the spine and regenerate the body. So one of the ways to destroy that potential is by engaging and overindulging in either food, sex, or any kind of forms that deplete one's energy and distracts one's energy from that central channel within. And sex, even if you're not like overly engaged in sexual activity, it is still very beneficial to dedicate a period of time in one's life to clean the space altogether. You know, that it's just like fasting. It's equivalent to that. If you want to talk about celibacy and not engaging in any sexual or any even sensual exchange with another individual, it's just like fasting. Well, give your system a break to clean all the old material that is obstructing the energy flow. And then there's various degrees to fasting, we can say. So just like with celibacy, it's like, okay, you abstain altogether, nothing. Like, I'm not even going to like hold hands with somebody or whatever, you know. But then there's the levels all the way to intercourse. So definitely when it comes to cleaning and regeneration of the body and the brain, this is where the magic, you know, and there's so much a connection also in our human body that it's not just the crown, not just the head, but it's the connection of the crown and the root. So we can relate it to even the sexual energy that lives more in the root, and the sexual physical human energy that lives in the first and the second chakra. Well, what happens when we connect the third eye and the crown to that? So that's why I'm very big on, yeah, you do the inner alchemy. It's all inner job. It's an inner process. But it's also about the connection point. You know, you even said that, Justin, right? Like the connection point. So in one's own body, in an individual physical body, to find that connection point just as much. And we can say even, you know, on a feminine masculine energy, the feminine will be the lower triangle, right? More of like the first and the second chakra, and the masculine will be the upper triangle pointing up to the third eye and the head and the brain and the crown chakra, right? But we got to get that connection point. So that inner alchemy is crucial to then, if we feel that this is something we are drawn to naturally and it is on our path, that's when we can come into divine union in a physical form. I'm not into like, oh, you know, it's just like the inner thing. Well, why do we have bodies? You know, like then we would just be like floating lights with nothing. So it's again, not to devalue it, discard it, diminish it, suppress it, push it aside like a piece of junk. But what is this body all about? What is available to me within this body? And no doubt that it's a really funny and interesting game to play, but that's the game of mastery, because this body can be either an animal or I don't even know what you want to call it, like a pure expression of divinity, right? And it's not either or in a sense. It's like just who's the master? Who's the master here? And for that, we need sovereignty. That we can still very much be in the human experience, feeling what is being felt and being in the body and in the process of the body, while recognizing, well, this body is a vehicle, it's a vessel for beyond. So I'm going to utilize, so to speak, I'm going to utilize the animal to take me, like it's a horse, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to jump on the horse so the horse can take me to higher planes. And that is the function or the the whole purpose of divine union in physical form, when two do come together. And again, I am keeping it just for a moment on a physical level between a man and a woman, because it's different. It's not the same. Two women together or two men together. There's biologically, it's not the same process. And the way a woman's body is designed and a male body is designed, it's not a coincidence when it comes to sexuality and coming together in that way, and how it's like a key in a hole, literally. And that key was designed to unlock something for both parties to serve a higher purpose, the light of God. So that's why the play of sexuality between two individuals was designed in the first place. And it is a celebration, like you said, Justin, so beautiful. Like, it is a celebration of this human incarnation. It's a way for us to express love, and it's divine love. So again, it's all about what's the level of awareness and consciousness coming into that act. And do you really exchange that with just any Joe Schmo? It's so sacred, and it's so powerful. It's so powerful. I have this theory. I'll just add that and then give it back to you. Because of my name too, right? Like Noah. And it's always confusing to people that don't know me, and they write with H, and sometimes I'll just introduce myself, Noah, no H, no arc. It's not the same guy. But I had this download, it was like a few years ago, because somebody even said to me, like, why don't you, open like a place and it's called Noah's Ark? And that just kind of opened up a lot of things for me. And I had this download that the whole story of Noah with the ark, bringing the couples, right? Bringing the two animals of each species to the ark to save from the flood. And yeah, we know that many of those stories were just metaphors anyway. But, it was just playing with the idea. And I believe, just my story of the whole thing, that he actually, maybe it was animals, but he actually brought in the divine unions to the ark, because he knew what the power that they were holding, that they had the keys to salvation. So that's just a little theory, and I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a great way to view that allegory, in the sense that God was bringing the flood, which is the death, and that's why creation has its way of giving us our just reward, no matter which path we choose. And if we choose the death path, then we shall have it. And so the flood represented the death of all the old ways, the downward causation, temporary experience, the outward ejaculation, the whatever, selfish pursuit of pleasure, and then what was guarded and preserved was this life force, the life preservation, to herald in the new age and herald in a reclaimed sense of sovereignty in life. So yeah, I like it. I think it just gives another layer to that story, and what it can bring to us and what it can mean to us, and how that story plays out within all of us. I mean, I know just by stepping out onto this path, onto the life path, when we are surrounded by the death cult, and we are immediately succumb to the chastising and ridicule, just as Noah did while he was building that ark. So as we're building this ark within this body, this temple, to preserve that sacred seed, to preserve the union between these two, to preserve life, just as he was doing, we're going to be ridiculed by everyone around. We're going to be mocked, because the very representation of life amidst a society filled with death is a constant reminder to those practicing that death that there might be another way. And pride kicks in and doesn't want to see that other way. The ego takes over, the demiurge, Satan. It does not want to view the life, because it means the end of the ego. It means the end of that death path. And so it will fight tooth and nail of anything that represents stepping outside of that. So just something to keep in mind, as we explore any of these topics of reclaiming our true sense of self and our sovereignty, we will be met with resistance from anyone who chooses to stay aligned with that death path. And there is a divide, and there's a necessary divide within that. So yeah, that was brilliantly said. And yeah, I'm wondering if I'll pass it back if you have any thoughts on what I just shared there. But I'd love to get into maybe some more practical applications for those who maybe feel they have or are in a healthy relationship and want to pursue this sort of reclaiming the sense of self without pursuing sex in this inverted sense. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that aspect.
Yes, I would love to talk about that. Well, I would say that, and I wanted to go there anyway, so it's perfect that you brought it up, because right, there might be people that are in a relationship and they know that this is my beloved, my soul, whatever you want to call it. There's no doubt there, that this is the person that I'm meant to do life with. I would say, and this is a very challenging thing for many people, actually, even on a health journey. If I interact with somebody that is in a relationship and I tell him or her, well, if your partner is not on the same wavelength, and he or she is not cleansing right now, a suggestion is to actually abstain in a relationship. I mean, that's another thing that people believe, that if I'm in a relationship, I'm with one partner, then sex has to be part of the equation all the time. Like, that's a little weird, because why? And again, regardless if you are in a relationship or not, it's a very sacred, powerful energy to exchange that even within partnership, I would say approach it with the highest reverence, right? So many times we do need to pause, to take a break from whatever it may be, so we can reevaluate, that we can clean and purify, and then come back to it from a purified place, from a centered place, from a transformed place. So I would say that this is a number one step for those that are in a partnership, and both individuals, because again, this is another interesting thing. One partner may be very interested in, like, hey, I want to explore sacred sexuality, and the other one might not really be into it, so that's something that needs to be talked about. And but if two individuals are on the same page about that, then the first step would be to agree, we're not going to exchange sexually. There's so many beautiful different ways that partners can, because I'm not saying, like, don't engage physically whatsoever, if it's the same partner and you in a loving, committed, devoted relationship, by all means, like, enjoy your bodies, exchange love and affection. Like, that's Venus in Taurus, right? It's like, yeah, it's beautiful. But when it comes to sexual exchange, you agree to pause. You agree to pause, just like you say, I'm going to go on a fast. You know, I'm going to give my digestive system a little breaky after all these years. And there's so much that a couple or individual partners can find within that space of abstinence, you can say, right? It's just like when we go to meditation and we in stillness and silence, and so much can be revealed to us and can be shown to us, and we can learn so much. So it can actually be a very beautiful process for a couple to say, okay, we're going to pause, a sacred pause, I call it. And let's rediscover what's available to us in partnership in that department. Right. So it's the mindset, and it is like, it boils down to what you said, Justin. It's the ego, because it's that animalistic part that is like, what? You're going to do what? So that's the whole game, to become the master of that animal. And there's so much expansion and growth that can come into a partnership from that place.
Yeah, beautifully said. And it's important to recognize that in relationship, we are either growing together or we are growing apart. And I'm not saying to be flippant on decisions in regards to big transitions within relationship in general, but this whole idea that because I have chosen to enter a partnership with someone, and when we choose to do that, it should be with the fullest and highest intention of pursuing that relationship for the fullest and highest expression that it can yield, with no intention of having like a temporary experience from the get-go. However, once I've entered into that relationship, there's no bearing on mandating or dictating that my partner will grow and align with me every step of the way. So it's vitally important that we're consistently reevaluating, is this partnership in alignment to our highest good? Or is this something that's becoming is this debilitating, you know? And again, not to be flippant in those decisions, but we tend to get caught up into this shame and guilt mode. And we have these conditions of this, again, death cult rituals of till death do us part, with no consideration of what happens within the ebb and flow of life and what it presents us, to be free to move about in those spaces. So to find that balance of freedom, not to be flippant and careless with discarding relationships at the first sign of any discomfort, and not staying so stuck in a relationship to where it becomes this debilitating force on oneself, to where I feel like I can't grow any longer, or my partner is not willing to engage with this pursuit of betterment of self. And this is in all areas, not just in the sex, but in the sexual area, this can show up quite directly. So it's an important conversation to continually have, and then and just be at peace with however it unfolds, not to be upset or angry if our partner does not want to do this, but just mean that, okay, this is time perhaps that we need to part ways for a time, or for perhaps for good. And that's the responsible model, so that we're all aligning, or honoring the magnetic attraction of those who are aligned in that way, in that space and way of being, and the natural dielectricity that has a repelling force if we're not in alignment. So just honoring that space entirely is a very, very important thing to do. Because I see so many who feel like they have to stick it out in a relationship when their partner has no intention whatsoever of growing, and we're in kind of a tricky, strange times. And of course, I'm not saying to be flippant with making rash decisions, but you'll know when the moment is where it's like we've exhausted all avenues of trying to come back together, and this isn't working. Or if haven't pursued that, then it's time to. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that as well, because this is, I mean, just looking at the sexual aspect, I mean, this is the highest form of magic in this creation, the sexual exchange. And just as it has the highest potential, it also has the lowest potential. So that sexual energy can become the highest form of white magic, which is enlivening, making things more expressive and beautiful within this, to celebrate the union between spirit and body, to express that on a physical level. It's perfect. And it can be the most devilish, dark form of black magic in this pursuit of sexual deviancy and taking and stealing and raping and all of that. So we have this dichotomy, this sort of, and there's theories that the forbidden fruit and discussed in the Garden of Eden was the outward ejaculation. This was that moment where they were tempted to pursue this sort of black magic lower form of this beautiful expression. So how can we recognize that with great power comes great responsibility? There's such a power in the sexual exchange. There's such a power in practicing in this way. And there is a great potential of harm to self and to others through it. So how can we wield that in a responsible way? How can we stay in that balanced state so that every encounter maintains that, not just in our ideas of sexual exchange, but in every form of connection with all of creation around, to celebrate that union point of I am connecting with another through a conversation, through a hug, through a glance, through a touching a leaf on a tree. I mean, that's a form of connection in that space, to do that with such care, knowing that tree, that leaf is a part of me. So why would I ever bring harm to it? My only actions will ever only be imbued to cultivate and create a deeper sense of connection, to celebrate this full and beautiful expression that we're having, instead of just harvesting that expression, ripping off that leaf or doing whatever, in a sense of like, I don't really care about the connection. I'm just doing it for pursuit of self, the lower self. So all of our connection points can be reevaluated. And am I pursuing this from a sacred sexual exchange, and getting away from this idea that sex always has to be about intercourse, but really it is the connection point between. So am I engaging in that way, honoring the connection, honoring the fact that there is no division truly? The separation is merely an illusion that we've crafted to have fun with, so that we can have this joy of coming back together again. So every moment is an opportunity for us to come back together again. Every moment is a party, to celebrate, to say, hey, we had such a fun time from this vantage point, from this way, but I want to come back together and share it with you. So how can I do that in all ways? So yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful conversation, and yeah, I love jumping into this.
What you just shared is precious and stunning. Yeah, it's like I need a moment to simulate that. It's very true. It's ultimately, even when we do talk about the sexual connection and how it has been conducted between humans, regardless of gender. It stems from disconnection to source. This disconnection from oneself, disconnection from source. Like you said, it's everything in every moment is sacred and beautiful. And when I interact with a flower, a tree, a rock, anything, I mean, basically it's like we are always having sex with God. Because sex, it's that energy that you said, it's that Kundalini energy coming to that point of connection. But with what? With God, with a creator. So in a way, and that's what nature is so freaking awesome, because nature is constantly having sex. We're always having sex with creation, with the creator, if we're always in connection with it. And actually, this is really cool about fruits. Side note, that the fruit from the tree is actually a byproduct of the tree's sex organ. The fruit that comes from a flower, that flower is the sex organ of the tree. And that's why eating fruits is like, the sexiest, and it's like, it's the juiciness of life. The juiciness of life, basically. And like, yes, let's enjoy it fully and completely with eyes and eye fully open and aware. So going back to what you said, Justin, that connection to everything, and finding that connection point, that when we do engage with another individual, that it's from the same place of, this is God now that I'm interacting with. And how would that interaction feel, look, and be coming from that place? Right? But that's the process, that's the journey. I mean, a majority of people, and we can look at our sexual archives and like, all right. There's some cleaning up to do in terms of our perspective and our ideas and our conditionings. And that's the work. Again, that's the great work. There's no shame, guilt, or like, we did the best we could with what we had, with what we knew. But that's why that inner work, that sacred pause, and just going within and finding that deep connection to oneself, and that's going to yield such different connections on all levels. Friendships, romantic partnerships, business, all connections are sacred. And we can bring that attitude of the ego, like you said, like the animal. What can I get from this? What can I take from here? How can I serve my agenda? We can bring that into every connection, every single one. But then when it comes to the sexual one, that is, it's painful. And that's why there's that sense of emptiness. That sense of emptiness. I can, again, sharing from my experience, and remember myself in the partners that I did engage with, I always had this, and it has nothing to do with physical pleasure. If it was like, quote unquote, good sex, as we describe it in our society, on a physical level, it had nothing to do with that, of being satisfied in that way. I always felt a sense of emptiness, especially when there was ejaculation. There was just a knowing inside of me, like, there's something off here. Something is just not right. And looking back now, I know what was that sense of emptiness. Because it's using something or engaging in an act that had that has a complete different function, a complete different purpose to it in a distorted way. So that's going to leave emptiness. It's just like with food, you know, you can stuff yourself all you want and it's a bottomless pit. It's just a bottomless pit because going back to that, well, that connection, that point of connection that our soul is so thirsty for. And when that cup is full, and then two cups come together, if that happens physically on the human level, then only overflowing can occur. And you can call it a flood, but it's not a destructive flood. It's a flood of light that has the potential to explode the universe into pieces and to emanate such a high level of light that has the power to dispel any darkness. That is what I see as the purpose of divine union in its physical form. Same thing applies to the inner alchemy and the inner union and what we can reach within oneself. But again, different strokes for different folks, right? Different journeys for different souls. I know that I am here for divine union, and I see very clearly what's the purpose for that and what's the potential. And going back even to Yahshua and Mary, that was their thing. Their union was so powerful and so pure. Or you can say, like, let's say it was so pure first, and then it was so powerful that we just keep referring back to them again and again and again, and why it has been hidden as well. It's one of the most hidden secrets of that time. And presenting, you know, Mary is the whore and all that jazz. So yeah, it's like you said, it is that connection, that point of connection. And I also want to say regarding the relationship that you mentioned there, and it's so true, and there's always a knowing, I feel, you know, for people. I know I've experienced that in several relationships that I just knew. It's like, it's not, you know, we're not growing here. I know we are not on like a good trajectory of growth and expansion as partners. But, you know, just like with the food, there's so many attachments and emotions and things. And when you bring in the sex, when two individuals connect sexually, then the energetic tentacles are so strong in place that it's not necessarily the easiest thing to just dismantle. So that's, again, something to be aware of. You know, who are you tying the cords with? And to what an extent and to what a degree. But yeah, this is the time. I'll just share, it's finished with that. This is the time, like you brought it up for a reason, but the South Node is in Libra. And I know for me, like I know so many people in my close circle of relationships that are just dissolving because of what you said. Nothing, no friction, no animosity or anything like that, just a realization we are on a different trajectory. And it's actually, that is true love. True love is not to stay together, just to stick it, just for the sake of saving the relationship. Love is giving the person the freedom to grow and to want the best. That's true love. Like, I want the best for you. I want you to be the happiest and the most fulfilled. And if it's not in this relationship, then is it truly love? If I'm just like fighting for something. And sometimes it just means that, well, maybe we need that space for a few months or a few years, or who knows. But yeah, that can be tied into our conversation about sovereignty and discerning. And it's not necessarily easy, especially when it comes to relationships, but it's the loving thing to do.
Yeah, loving all around, loving the self and loving the other self, the partner that we're with. There is love within that to make those decisions even when they might be challenging. Love is not always the sort of airy-fairy fluffy thing that we've been conditioned with. Sometimes it is tough love. Sometimes it says like, hey, like, okay, we're not in alignment here, and it doesn't mean I love you any less, but it just means we're going different paths. It just means we're going different spaces. So yeah, it is definitely something to consider. And yeah, I'd love to maybe shift into some questions here, if you're okay with that. So I know Aubrey had her hand raised earlier. Did you have a question, Aubrey?
Oh, I didn't realize if I did. I do actually have a question, but it's kind of more off topic that I wrote down. Noah, you were saying or talking a little bit at the beginning about the ideal birth time is like, or conception and birth time, and when children are birthed, it's like during the spring. But let's say that humanity did that and everyone had their children during that time. Like, how would that affect the world? And like, is that ideal? You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Is this the Aubrey I think it is?
Yes.
Hello. I thought so when I saw the name. Hello, Miss Aubrey. So yeah, I would say that even when it comes to the whole procreation and having kids, that the world is a little bit overpopulated in the sense that there's so many, like I said at the beginning, like, oh, oops, and people are just having sex and, oh, we are pregnant and now we have 4 kids that we never really intended to have. So there's something to be said about that when sacred sexuality is actually practiced, then we wouldn't have so many pregnancies to begin with. Like, the idea that the human race needs to reach the numbers of millions upon millions is not necessarily the divine design or the divine plan. And yeah, what you're saying is valid. I wonder what Justin have to say about that. But just according to the cycles of us being in sync with nature, that will be the more ideal, you can say. And maybe you give and take a month or so, but like being born in the middle of the winter is not necessarily the most synced up option on the table out of the 12 months.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This conversation has been so intriguing, and I'm happy that I hopped on. And of course, I love hearing your voice, Noah, and miss you. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Aubrey. Thanks for joining us today. And yeah, my thoughts on that would be just, we've been so conditioned in this sort of lack-based mentality that it requires so much resources and time, and especially for women, having been thrust into this basically solitary, of course, in some relationships there are men who help to varying degrees, but largely the burden has been placed on women to have to do all of this and have to take on so much from that. So when we shift out of this scarcity mentality and this sort of dog eat dog, individualized approach to everything, where everyone has to take care of themselves and move into a harmonious, abundant, communal environment, then this can easily be shifted to where, as a society, we can channel our resources and our attention into these times. And I feel like if we were in a more cyclical way, it would almost help us. It would help us to prepare for that, and approach it from a more celebratory way where we're all in alignment. So, I mean, I can just imagine having these new bornings happening all at the same time, this wonderful miracle of children all coming up and growing up together from the same sort of generation, the same wave, and then having that continuous, instead of it being now where it's more of a randomized, and we're so careless and flippant with how it happens. And as we mentioned at the beginning, as Noah mentioned, how it's just kind of like accidental a lot of times. It's not even really intentional with how we have it. So you have that energetic imprint on the child of while they're in the womb, it being an accident, whether it scared the mother from experiencing it or them not wanting to have the child. All of that energetic imprint is happening on that child. So if we can shift that away from that distorted, inverted reality to this intentional space, to where this is a time that not only between partners we're agreeing would be ideal for us to bring a child into this space, but as a community, as a whole society, where we are gearing up energetically for this receptive space to bring this child into this experience and celebrate every nuance of how this comes about. So I don't see any issue with overwhelm when we have that. Of course, from the perspective that we're at now, it does seem like a far fetch, because we're so isolated in this, as I mentioned, this scarcity mindset and this sort of individualized approach to everything. But all of that's changing. New Earth is going to be such a profound shift away from that reality that, yeah, I think it'll be a beautiful way and to express in that sense. Not saying that there will be any dictation or forcing of people to stay in alignment with this seasonal shifting. However, the proof will be in the pudding. You know, it'll be, we'll see what will happen when we can have a harmonized approach to everything, including having children, and how that will look. And so people will naturally just think, oh, wow, this is the best way to do it. You know, this is truly ideal for us to align our bodies with the seasons and to align this time period to have the greatest number of births of bornings happen on Aries, you know, at the beginning, so that child can experience the full fruition of the 12 going through that cycle. And then developing further. So yeah, it's a beautiful question. And I think when we have because this kind of gets into a question I wanted to cover of, somebody might think, well, if men aren't supposed to ejaculate, well, how are we supposed to procreate? You know, how is that supposed to even happen? Which is something that will take time for us to really step into ourselves. But as we step into our light body, light can transmit DNA. Light can transmit physical matter. So when we are illuminated, when we are giving of light, then we are also giving of life. And we're aligning with that divine purpose and that trust and that faith of when is the time for this child to come into this space. So if my body and her body is in that space of light, then that light is going to be helping to transmit that DNA to create that imprint to allow that child to come into fruition without the need of the physical transmission. It's a much more challenging process to go into. You know, we've chosen for this time the sort of animalistic version of procreation, and therefore we've yielded a more animalistic version of ourselves. We've done this. You know, we've conditioned ourselves, as Santos Bonacci likes to mention. We've been trained to consume death and ejaculate life. So to reconfigure that entirely and step back into our, the higher design of this form, to really trust the divine in that timing, and trust that if I am not in that space of transmitting light in that way, then perhaps I'm not ready to have children. Perhaps it's not within the will of the divine influence to do this, and get out of this sort of animalistic fear of dying out or any of these kind of things. Like, God's got us. We're held in all moments. So the natural balance will always be restored, and we will naturally procreate in a way that is in alignment with this, with us as angels of light. We are angels of light. So how do we augment and increase this ability to transmit this light? And how does that transmit into all around me, this included? So it's a great, it's an interesting thing to talk about. And I'm sure we will have many discussions, and it will take much learning to go through it. And of course, it'll be a fun process to explore, but it is exciting to consider. It's absolutely.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Beautifully said, as always. And it's in regards to the question, and what you said, Justin, is so perfect about the timing and how it really is what we are talking about here in regards to giving birth to physical children. It's like it's a transformation within the entire system, just like Justin described, like to reach a certain level of divine functioning, that this won't be an issue anymore. It's not going to be like a calculated thing. Even people will naturally, again, just like with the food and moving away from it, that it's a natural process, even with sexuality, that will naturally align more and more with the divine design and with the natural cycles. We don't need to read it in a book. That we will naturally, like if you are in a partnership and you feel that a soul wants to come through, because that's another thing, to really just feel that that is the purpose of the partnership. And if that is true, then there will be a natural alignment with the timing to do so, which will always be connected to nature when we are connected with nature. That's the thing. It will just be a natural and organic thing as part of an enlightened society. And then, we'll just operate on completely different principles. And then the second part, Justin, of do we actually need that semen fluid to conceive? Well, I can speak from experience about that. And if I ever do, then, we'll do another video at some point about that. But I can see how that is exactly the same as living on light. Like, what's the difference? The way you described it is absolutely perfect. That just like the body with no physical food can totally be sustained and strong, nevertheless, not just sustained, but strong and regenerate itself just on light, then why would the Immaculate Conception, as we call it, be any different? Because it's basically just utilizing that cosmic light to bring life into physical form. Light and electricity. It's not like necessarily I can just do it tomorrow. But when, again, going back to living in an enlightened society where actually those skills are being taught from a very young age, it's just embedded in our DNA. It's not like us. What we are doing now is remembering those divine codes. be remembering it, but we'll come to a time in which there won't be the process of remembering. Everyone will just be embedded, infused with that already. It will be, you can say, a normal thing. So if we are, like Justin said, connected to that light body and embodying that light body and living from that light body, then of course, why not? Why wouldn't that be a possibility? Conceiving a physical child without that fluid. Because just like with everything else we've been talking about, what is that purpose of that male fluid beside just carrying sperm to transfer into a female body? Not saying that that's wrong, but that's a bad way to conceive a child. It's just how to go about it. And what's the other function of that fluid? So yeah, it's fun to explore, like you said. It's possible here.
Yeah, even just looking at the moment of conception, which from our current knowledge of the physical expression of that, where the sperm does meet the egg, there is a spark of light and illumination that happens. And this is the moment where consciousness imprints upon that form. So this is just, to me, this is God showing us a way that we can replicate this and do this naturally without the need of that sperm to be there. So that sperm would be replaced by that light transmission from one body to another. And yeah, I'm sure it will take some time for us to recalibrate ourselves just with everything. And there's no need to rush anything or to beat ourselves up for this way or that way. But just to recognize, as we discussed in the pranic living discussion, recognize where we can get to, recognize these higher forms that our body can activate, just so we know and believe the potential and don't limit ourselves just to that these other beliefs that we are limited or it has to be this way always. No, this is just the way that it is now, and that's okay, but it doesn't have to be. So yeah, it's a great thing to get into. And yeah, I will just pass it off and see if anybody else wants to jump in. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, or if you want to jump in, feel free.
Hi, it's Lila. I'd love to make a couple of comments. First of all, what a thrill it is to be part of this conversation. Thank you so much for bringing it to the table, and for the vulnerable and transparent shares. Firstly, I wanted to say, Noah, you spoke about being, on the earth and out in nature, and basically that we're making love to everything. And I loved that perspective. I completely agree that when my meditation became that a while back, it was just like, I'm making love to everything. I'm making love to the path that I'm walking down. I'm making love to the trees that I'm seeing. And then I took that deeper into my own sacred sexuality practice. And, I was like, God, make love to me, instead of being fixated on a certain being, right? And that really shifted my reality in so many beautiful ways. So I just really appreciate that perspective. And I hope that me echoing it again will just bring it to people's awareness if they're not already practicing that, both in their own sacred sexuality, but thinking of it all as sacred sexuality, right? So, when we hear the bird singing, that's the bird making love to us with its sound. It's absolutely incredible when that shift happens and we live that way. So yeah, I wanted to echo that. And then, as far as the conscious conception, Justin, you took the words out of my mouth. I was just going to say, light transfer or a spark is already absolutely happening, and that's in our very barbaric ways that we know. So I just don't want to discount the fact that we've all been creative from that spark, and just because science says this is what's happening, and has some archaic video of it or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't already all being created by that spark of light. And not to minimize our own creation, even if we have come from less than conscious parents, because it's all part of the divine circle, and consciousness is brought to those beings also by being maybe a father or mother unexpectedly. I'll certainly say that for my own case. It was an unexpected adventure, and it has broadened me and made me more of the woman that I am, and I'm so grateful for it. But I do absolutely support conscious conception, and just wanted to share an incredible text. If you haven't read about it, it's called Conscious Conception by Janine Parvey. She is incredible. She's an old herbalist, and that book is incredible. Wherever you are, if you've had your children and you have some things that you'd like to heal, or if you are considering childbearing, it is just a wonderful, wonderful book to delve into and just explore about your own conception, and then how you might consciously conceive others. And then also I wanted to say thank you so much for bringing the awareness as far as the astrological components that are at play. I really enjoy that part of this conversation. It's very powerful to be sort of have the in real time conversation as far as what's affecting us when you come into your conversations. So just wanted to give a big thank you for that. And lastly, I was hoping that you might comment maybe just briefly around this idea of conception in alignment with your astrological reality. I heard after my son was conceived while I was pregnant that it actually is, in alignment with nature and astrology to sort of line up with the degrees of your sun and moon. And then when I looked back, sure enough, I had conceived my son. I have a moon in Pisces and a sun in Aries. And it was just absolutely shocking to me because I was bleeding, and I had used the rhythm method for most of my adult life very successfully. And and then I read this and I was like, wow, it really was an alignment. So just kind of curious if you've heard of this and have any comments about it. And then also to encourage others who are considering all of this to look into that, because that's quite interesting, especially if you are attempting to consciously conceive and it hasn't happened for whatever reasons. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lila, for everything that you shared. Glorious share. Appreciate every word. And to comment on the last thing there with the astrological alignment, this is fascinating. I'm really happy and grateful that you brought it up because, years ago when I started diving deeper into astrology and looking at charts, I actually did ask the question, well, the birth chart represents the moment that a person comes, a soul incarnates into the earth physically. You came out of your mama's womb in that particular moment. However, what about the moment of conception? I literally asked that question because that is the moment that we were created on an energetic level and even physically. Once the sperm met the egg, it can be more challenging because not everyone knows. I can ask my parents, but they can't give me an exact date. I doubt that they remember when exactly. We can know approximately. If I was born in November, then I was conceived in February or somewhere around then. but it's a little bit more challenging for people, right, to find out the moment, the exact, you are more conscious, so you can look back and say, well, this was the day of conception, and look up the astrological chart. But nevertheless, there's actually, I feel a completely different branch to astrology, or another layer, when we calculate, when we factor in if somebody does have the exact date, maybe not the exact time, but exact date of conception, that we can see the alignment and how that actually, or the overlay of the moment of conception with the moment of the actual birth, and the interplay of those two moments in time. So,
it's interesting. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in on that. No, it's interesting because certainly it would have to be pretty specific because of the moon could go void, or, it's just a 2.5 day period that when the moon is changing. And I was in special circumstances that there was only one time when it happened in a 5 day period or whatever. So I could know, but I know that not, everybody does, especially if you're married and you're really interacting with each other often. So that may be part of the conscious conception movement that we're moving towards, just, being more aware. And then the other thing I wanted to say about that is, yes, in Vedic astrology, of course, they're using 2 points of reference. And in human design, we use not just the birth time, but the 6 month in utero time. So it's not with conception, actually. It's actually with when you're 6 months in utero, which according to Ra, that was what was channeled to him to use. And that really aligns with the Michael Newton teachings that we spoke about. I think that was on Friday. This man who's done all this hypnosis to look at the life between life work, where he says research in his research, person after person does say that the spirit actually chooses to solidify or anchor into the body at about 6 months in utero, just because there are things that can move or shift, and then the pregnancy maybe doesn't last. And so anyways, I don't know what the answer is to that. I would imagine that all 3 of those times, the conception, the 6 month-ish in utero, and then the birth time, are all important. But it's certainly fascinating to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a, I think as even in this topic of discussing how the sexual act is not something to be done flippantly, it will certainly make it much easier to really distinguish between, when these things happen, and sort of catalog that. And then we also have to consider that the time in the womb perhaps is not even correct. I've heard discussion that it's possible that we should be in the womb for 10 months, 11 months, and perhaps even a full cycle, to really get the full expression within the womb for that full 12 of the zodiac. So these will be things that will continually evolve as we go deeper into this. So we'll see what happens.
I love that you said that, Justin. The telepathy is real. As literally just, when Layla said that, that's what I got. It's like the whole 9 months thing. And if you're familiar with George W. Carey, his books are just treasures. The correlations that he makes in his books about, that's where I learned so much, the development of a human and consciousness, and how that is connected to the cosmos, and the whole idea that we are missing those 3 months. Like, what's that? Was that kind of like a glitch in the system, or I don't know. I don't necessarily have the answers, but that's what came up for me now. The idea that we are moving in the direction of finding more and more truth, that perhaps that is part of it, that it is actually a 12-month, a full circle, a full cycle. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. But it's something
Well,
to contemplate.
I was just going to say, in the birth workers realm, it's very we think of it as 10 months, and also there is if you look at it anatomically, the reason why at this point it has to be at the 9 to 10 month space is because the way that the pelvis opens really couldn't allow for the head any later. So in, I guess, what I would call conscious birth work at this point, as a doula, we are definitely teaching our mamas, this is, there's a fourth trimester here. And those 3 months need to be, the baby needs to be held in the C curve, which means the fetal position, encouraging what the baby would be doing probably in utero, protecting from lights, protecting from extension, which means a very open body with the head thrown back, which is going to be commonly happening from being too exposed to just even a noisy room or a room with even typical lights, these kinds of things. But yeah, it is interesting. Maybe anatomically we're going to shift to be able to provide for the child within, to keep them within longer. Oh, thanks, guys. This is just so fascinating.
Yeah, this is fun stuff. Maybe it's like a topic for another conversation, but I will say that it's, brilliant what you shared there, Laila, about the anatomy and the body of the woman. And let us remember that the physical, biological structure of the body has been distorted. Aside from us just descending from light frequency to more dense physical bodies, which is not wrong at all. I mean, these bodies are amazing, and the light is still there to be remembered and activated and lived through. However, there's something to be said in our human evolution, or call it evolution, devolution, degeneration that has occurred in the last few generations, that the actual biological structure of the body has been distorted. And that has been shown when it comes to our jaws and our teeth. And no wonder that the jaw is connected with the hips and the pelvis. So what even the women that you work with, we're not working with the original blueprint. We're not. And we got to remember that we are basing everything that is out there in science is all based on an already flipped upside down, ass backwards structure that was never the original design. So that's where all the questions come up, is like, oh, okay, then we don't even know what things could be or are, because it's all been based on, inverted, distorted, degenerated state of the biological structure. And we're looking at acidic bodies. And when bodies are acidic, things are more contracted, including the pelvis. That's actually why women have painful births. It was never meant and designed to be painful. It's actually an orgasmic experience when the child moves through that canal, and a woman can reach like orgasmic states, literally, just like in intercourse. That is not just the stimulation of pleasure centers. It's that orgasmic bliss of the divine. And that's what a birth is. It's not painful, but acidic body with very tight hips, very contracted womb, and contracted structure is going to yield painful results. Yeah, that's definitely a whole nother conversation when it comes to female health and the female design that is more of the truth and not what we know and been conditioned to believe as women, that this is just natural.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's exciting to explore all of these things. So I do know that we are about out of time today. So I just wanted to give an opportunity for Noa to give any closing comments on this beautiful discussion today. Leave us with anything that you feel like has been unsaid.
Oh, a lot has been said. I'll just close with just what I said. This is our own personal journey for each and every one of us to ask the questions and align with the truth that we have in our hearts. Just receiving the information and remaining as open as possible and tuning into one's own intuition and knowing. And I do want to, because Lila mentioned a book, if you are called to explore more about sacred sexuality, and this is more for those that are on the path of divine union in this life, but even if not, even if it's just within yourself, a beautiful, beautiful book that is called Sacred Sexual Union. The name of the book is very misleading because you would think, oh, it's just about sexuality, but it's really not. It really is. It does focus on divine union and preparing oneself physically, energetically, and spiritually for that union. If you are on that path, and doing the individual, the inner work that may or may not yield that divine external manifestation, but will bring many other gifts. And yes, there is a chapter dedicated to cultivating that sexual energy, both for women and both for men, and breaking down biologically the sexual regions of a female body and female organs and male organs, the sexual organs, and breaking that down to what they hold energetically. So there's a ton of information and practical applications as well in that book. So I am going to throw that out there if those that are intrigued or curious and would like to explore that area.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah. So this has been an amazing conversation. Really appreciate you, Noa, for stepping up into this, and for everyone here listening on. Lila, Aubrey, thanks for chiming in today. And yeah, I'm sure this will be a topic that will come up as we continue to explore realigning back to ourselves. And it all comes back to that inner work. This sacred sexuality is simply an outer expression of that. So it is vitally important that we don't project our disconnection within onto others, and really cultivate that connection with ourselves, with our divinity, between those masculine and feminine forces within us, before we really begin to try and do that otherwise in all ways. So let's continue cultivating that practice. And I'm just grateful to be a part of this. So thanks again, Noa, for being here today. And thank you everybody for listening. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day, wherever you are. We all love you. Take care, everybody. Bye.